Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Dore, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Welcome to this special mini-series where we take a closer look at the people and organisations in the wine world who are championing diversity, equity and inclusion. So across these episodes, I'm going to be sitting down with inspiring voices from winemakers and educators to change makers across the industry, all doing meaningful work to shape a more inclusive future for wine. These conversations are designed to uplift, to challenge, and to leave us all reflecting on how we can make positive changes in our own spaces, whether that's in the vineyard, the tasting room, or the boardroom. While we may not be diving quite as deep into the usual wine geekery this time around, I promise you'll still walk away with plenty to think about, fresh perspectives, and perhaps a few new producers to discover, all rooted in purpose. I hope each episode leaves you feeling just a little bit more inspired than when you started. So to open this special series, I'm honoured to welcome Remy Drabkin, founder and winemaker at Remy Wines in Oregon's Willamette Valley. Remy grew up surrounded by vineyards and community and announced at just 8 years old that she would become a winemaker. She made good on that promise, training around the world before returning home to establish Remy Wines, known for championing Italian varieties like Lagrein, which we will discuss on this episode. But Remy's impact reaches far beyond the cellar. She's a powerful advocate for inclusion in the wine industry, the founder of Wine Country Pride and Queer Wine Fest, and McMinnville's first openly queer and first female mayor. In this conversation, we explore how intention shapes everything from hiring to hospitality, why true inclusivity starts with the thoughtful everyday choices. We also talk about the Oregon wine region and, of course, paint a picture of Willamette Valley so you can understand a little more the climate and landscape. So pour yourself a glass of wine and enjoy the episode. Remy, I do not know where to start because your story reading up, for me, I felt like inclusivity, it's not like it's an initiative for you. It's like this ecosystem. So many people, you're a very small winery in Oregon. Can you maybe start us off by walking us through how intention shapes everything from hiring to all of your community partnerships? And I appreciate that is a very long question to start with.
Sure. How intention shapes everything. So I think it's kind of philosophical and it's a philosophy that turns into action. We design our realities, right? We make choices every day that inform how we live our lives. And when we're thinking about those things for ourselves, usually, or maybe a nearby family member, maybe those decisions are really easy. Mom and dad are getting older, or one of the others getting older, and we want to put them in a single level house, or we want to reduce stairs, right, for their living experience. So when we personalize our design choices, both in our physical world, but also in how we carry out our day-to-day choices, we think about that when we think about that on a personal level, it makes a lot of sense to us. And I think the challenge or the intention or the building of community, the inclusiveness, the information about hiring practices, etc., it comes from that same philosophy, which is that if you're intentional in how you administer a system or design a workspace, then and you're intentional about it not only for your own needs, but for the needs of your coworkers, the needs of your customers, and also preferably always kind of trying to design for the need that you haven't yet imagined. I think when you do that, then you start creating a very intentional company or life, etc. So how's that for a really long answer to your really long first question and maybe difficult to follow? Sorry. I need a warm up.
Uh,
I always need a warm up. I'm a little rambly at first.
oh, I love that. That was quite deep, though. Like, it's kind of, I feel like we've started off with absolute intention because no, this is, I'm talking to you because you really feel like you've done something that many other wineries have not been able to achieve. Like you said, that diversity is not just welcomed at Remy Wines, which is what many wineries are doing, and they get a massive thumbs up. Great. But for you, it's really foundational. So, how do you approach creating this truly inclusive workplace and not just on paper, but actually in practice? Another deep question.
Yes. So when I'm creating a space or entering into some new practice for the company, we have to undertake something. The first thing that I keep in mind is that I'm actually designing for the people that are already here, if that makes sense. But you want really like solid, how do I put it into practice? So I hear what you're going for. I think I hesitate in some ways because I always am concerned about sounding somehow self-congratulatory on things that I think we should
Mm.
just be doing as a standard practice. So when I'm thinking about this workspace here, the physical winemaking workspace, we did some very small physical changes to just make it easier on our bodies. We installed gas lines throughout the facility so that we could have an exterior gas cage, specifically so that we weren't wheeling carts of gas around on ham trucks anymore. It's a small thing, but winemaking is really hard on our bodies. So to not have to do that pretty much daily exercise of lifting that thing, which is also a dangerous thing to be moving around. Okay, so that's an exceptionally small thing, but our small actions matter. Something that was much more impactful, maybe on the day-to-day basis and less preventative, was creating an employee restroom that served our vineyard stewards. Oftentimes, when we're farming, we're using porta potties. Setting up adequate hand washing can be a bigger challenge. It's also hot when you're working and cold and wet, depending on the season, so you're in a lot of elements. And, if you're working outside, let's say it's muddy out, going and getting into a porta potty for this very basic human need is not a comfortable experience. So going back to like, I don't want to be self-congratulatory for designing a thoughtful restroom for the people that care for this land, but because that's what we should all be doing. So I'm not self-congratulatory, but those are the actions that I took, and it's appreciated. It translates through to the experience of working here. When you've kind of applied some cultural competency to the physical design of your space. We are thoughtful about where and how we advertise for positions. We're thoughtful about not creating barriers either to the application itself, but also not necessarily eliminating people based on what they put on paper, right? So being open and invested in interviewing and trying to ask a lot of questions that drive towards what a person's skills are, instead of trying to look for a person that you think fits a mold of what you need. So those are some more concrete things. And then since I gave myself this great segue unintentionally, the other thing, we invented some carbon sequestering structural concrete here at Remy Wines, and it launched a new company that now has massive investment from the
What?
state of Oregon. It's not my company. I have no economic interest in it. I helped them flex, and now there's these solid carbon is the name of the company, and there's this carbon sequestering structural concrete everywhere, and concrete's responsible for like 7 to 9% of the world's total CO2 emissions. So it's a really big impact item. And I think that that's also part of this overall conversation is that we are environmental stewards, But being environmental stewards is also being inclusive and humanitarian, because those of us that suffer the most from the negative environmental impacts are already disadvantaged communities. So environmental justice is justice. Environmental action or thoughtfulness is justice in its own way as well. So it's hard to talk about an ecosystem because an ecosystem is so many things. To call out any one of these little
Mm.
things, it's hard to paint the whole picture. And usually, when I start talking about an effort, it really starts to kind of unroll, and you start to see the broader and broader impacts. The concrete was one part of an adaptive reuse project we did on an old tractor barn here. But there are so many other small touches in how we did just a construction project, from using materials from other construction sites to intentionally using a woman owned roofing company. Also, when we were faced with a water challenge, we came up with a creative solution, and then a creative solution of how we could continue to keep that water source viable. So, with our woman owned roofing company, we installed a heavily insulated roof that also engineered for a future solar array. And then it serves as a water collection system for our fire suppression pond, which we put in. But then we needed to surround it with native species of plants because we weren't originally planning on building a pond. That itself was an adaptation. So we didn't have bug control. So then we were looking at, well, what species do we put in? So we just ended up working with Oregon State University and applying for a grant and getting these students out here that were studying our native bee populations. So then they made a recommendation about what types of plants we should be planting. And we talked with our neighbors. So we created pollinator pathways while we were also creating healthy vegetation around this pond site, which was really only created because we needed fire suppression and we didn't want to take down trees and put in big plastic tanks. That's a good example.
That was fabulous. I mean, literally, I'm like, where do I go from here? That was such a good explanation. I just want to spend some time in your head, actually, just be working through all of these processes. But you've touched on so many beautiful things of effectively what you've said is being intentional in every aspect of creating a workspace, running a business, thinking about the environment, thinking about humanity. And I think that's the thing that has really inspired me. That for you, you really want to create this culture of care. So, I mean, I'm interested to ask this question now. You talked about how the weekly team meetings were something that were really important for your whole team, which you haven't touched on yet. So let's see what you say there. But also, you have created the Queer Wine Fest that's been running for, you let me know how many years, which seems to have done something really powerful too. So I hand the baton back over to you to talk more about these things.
Okay. Well, weekly team meetings, that's something that's come in and out of our practices at the winery. I always think it's good to be really honest. We don't always succeed in our efforts, right? So I always think it's great to be upfront and say, "Hey, these are things I've tried, but sometimes I also don't succeed in doing them." Those weekly team meetings are a huge goal for us. They're just an important connection. And what you and I talked about a little bit was that sometimes it's important to have a check-in with your coworkers about things other than work, not water cooler talk, but a dedicated space to just have like when something big happens. And quite frankly, a lot of big things are happening every single day right now, and we don't even know almost on a day-to-day basis what this country is going to look like. And here, our staff, we have a lot of women that work here. We have non-binary people that work here. We have people of color that work here. We have immigrant families that work here. I wouldn't hesitate to say that out loud because I don't want to say, hey, alert anyone to. But of course, I mean, we're a farm. Our economy locally is dependent on immigration for workforce, and for the care of these lands. Which, if we don't take care of the land after we plant these farms, it's they don't just immediately return to some wild, beautiful state. And I'm sorry to kind of branch off, but that's what happens. Here we are, we're on 30 acres. I have 8 of those planted to grapes. About 11 are dedicated to the vines plus headlands and the tasting room and the winery. The rest is forested, and it's riparian forested. But we have to go in and get the English ivy out of there. No offense. We're trying to liberate our remaining native oak trees from Himalayan blackberries and English ivy and things like that. Oh my gosh, this is so far away from why our team meeting is important. But we're at this place where really big things are happening every day, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And sometimes it's important to really check in because we are impacted. I am impacted by what's happening everywhere, every day. And I mean, so are you. I guess that's kind of part of the importance of the team meeting. We are all connected ultimately, and recognizing and seeing other people's humanity and what's impacting another person in their life that is such an important part of being able to work with somebody. You could think about it on a scale of things that maybe things we all have in common. Somebody has a relative that passes away. Everybody would be sensitive to that person in that context in that day. They probably wouldn't tell any jokes about somebody dying, right? Like you wouldn't do that. But sometimes it's really hard for us to expand our scope and recognize all the things that impact the people around us. And we can't. I can't fully understand somebody else's experience, but I can listen to them and listen to the things that they tell me aren't working at my company, in our region, in our state, in the United States. And you can make a choice to respond to that. And so just that check-in beyond what the work is that we're doing is a really important set for the week, and making sure everybody launches. And I think we have great team chemistry. Everyone honestly likes each other. We like coming to work. It's a nice place to work. Okay, Queer Wine Fest. Queer Wine Fest is maybe one of the best representations of building community through intention. So I'm going to do my best to get all the parts of this and concisely. So I grew up in this rural area and have spent the majority of my life here. And there was never any kind of pride celebration. So in 2020, decided to launch a COVID safe pride celebration with some friends and other business owners. We did that at Remy Wines. It was very successful. We ended up raising a lot of money. We gave money away. We started a nonprofit. That nonprofit is called Wine Country Pride. It is a regional queer serving organization that offers community grants and scholarships and free flag distribution and all sorts of good things, as well as puts on year-round events in this, again, very rural area. When we launched the nonprofit, I wanted to do something else at Remy Wines because we've been hosting it here, right? So somebody was asking me, literally, actually, a reporter was asking me what I was going to do next. And I said, I don't know, maybe we'll have some sort of queer wine festival. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. That's what we're going to do. We're going to have a queer wine festival. And that was it. And I was like, you guys, we're having a queer wine festival this summer. We got to get on it. Reach out to every queer-led winery. And right there, we didn't know. We were like, okay, well, us. And then, oh yeah, I know that guy is a winemaker. And it was really slow. And at first we started with 5 wineries, and that's all we could find. Not just here, we were looking everywhere. We were looking through wine publications and the internet. We were only finding 5 queer-led, visibly queer-led wineries. So then we started asking the people that were here. And what turned out was there was just a tremendous number of queer-led wineries. It just wasn't always really being discussed. And I think that's a reflection on the industry. But moving forward for Queer Wine Fest addressing that, we're 4 years in now. This year we have wineries from the entire Western Seaboard, Oregon, Washington, and California. although they don't go in that order, just for, it's Washington's top, Oregon, then California. Sandwich, that's the whole western seaboard of the United States. But we have representation from all three of those states. We have large wineries and small wineries. We have newer wineries, and we have wineries that have been well established for a long time, and that are known internationally, and well known nationally. We also are very intentional about the kind of supportive, the other things that go into the festival. So the caterer is a queer-led caterer. We don't have a litmus test. You don't have to be queer to be engaged with the festival. In fact, the band that's headlining this year, Camp Crush, they're not a queer couple, but man, they really get queer culture. They like the music, all of it. It's fantastic. So we started supporting all of these other businesses, but then there were other components to the event. So there's the fun, like just the festival fun part, but that is really highlighting queer culture. We have haircuts here, and a lot of people were like, why are you having haircuts at a wine festival? But our hair and queer culture is so important to us. I mean, it's important to everybody, right? It's intentional. You got up, you made an intentional decision about how to present yourself out to the world today. But it's really highlighted oftentimes, especially in underrepresented communities. That often part of our identity is really tied to our hair. And I will just pause here really quick. Sorry. Ugh. Just to say that queer people are all people, right? Queer people are all races and ethnicities, income levels, education levels, religions, political leanings. Like, queer people are all people. So when you're trying to be really intentional about creating safe spaces for queer people, you're really talking about creating safe spaces for everyone. Okay, so we're lifting up all of these queer-led businesses. We're doing this incredible festival. We've got all of this great queer culture popped in to the event. It's also a fundraiser for Wine Country Pride, the nonprofit, right? But that's not the only nonprofit we work with. We work with a local organization called Zero Waste, and they make sure that it's truly a zero waste event. So we have volunteers on site sorting garbage, compost, and recycling to make sure that it all gets to its next best, highest use. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. We tie in and tie in and tie in. You probably know I just won the Governor's Award for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging in and accessibility tourism. And I was talking to somebody about this and saying that it's, the events that we created, the things that we were doing, Wine Country Pride and Queer Wine Fest, this was serving my community that was here. This was serving my queer wine community, my queer community that wasn't wine community. But this was serving our local community and our regional community. The impact of that was it made the area a huge tourist draw. McMinnville was written up as the second friendliest small town in America for queer people while I was mayor. And Queer Wine Fest was like headlined as the gayest wine event in the nation. I mean, so it's just, it does. Oh, and maybe the more important part related back to the wine, we don't run it the way most wine festivals run. Most places, if you show up at a wine festival and there's like everybody's got a booth and they're pouring their different things, most likely they have paid to be there. If you're at a farmer's market, right, you've paid to be there. We really wanted to break down barriers for participation. A lot of our wineries already have to travel to be here. So one thing that we do is we do a sample allowance, meaning we make sure that every winery is getting a set amount of money to take home to cover the wines that they're pouring at the event. And then we provide everything. Like, as a winemaker, you only have to show up with yourself and your wine. We've given you all the staffing support you need, all the ice, all the whatever. Ice might sound small. We spend weeks making sure we have enough ice on hand because it's a hot wine festival. It's a hot gay wine festival. The other thing is that I cook lunch for all of our visiting winemakers right before the festival. So everyone gets here our winemakers get here a couple hours early. We all sit down together and eat, and everybody gets to know one another and create those connections and something more than just pouring wine, quick, intensely. And that in and of itself has created these amazing professional networks within the wine community that just didn't exist before. Most industries, they have something like like if you work for a big corporation, they're going to have an employee resource group or something where you can go and be like, this is what it's like to be queer and work here, right? And let me talk about it. But the wine industry is largely very small businesses, tons and tons of small businesses. So, this was almost like without any of the BS of being part of a corporation. It was like it was like an employee resource group, great luncheon right before a big party. So yeah, man, it just and it gets a lot of attention. So it's also I'm bringing whatever stage I'm getting, I'm making sure that everyone's up there with me.
I I love this because it just shows. I feel like anybody listening, hopefully, almost the takeaway is if you are doing things with intention, things can just massively grow on some epic scale that maybe you hadn't even dreamed about. And I just think Willamette Valley is like so proud, should be so proud to have you. So let's talk about Willamette Valley now because
Okay, wait. Can I tell you a quick story? Okay, I feel like because I'm so long-winded, this short story, it well encapsulates things. So it might be a little fallback.
okay.
Okay, so I just won this governor's award, which was great. We had to go for a rehearsal before the awards ceremony so that like everybody walked across the stage at the same time and you had the timing and you need the entrance and the exit. So we're there at the rehearsal and the first couple people go across the stage and they're playing like the same little ditty for everybody. And I was like, I'm sorry, do we all get the same walk on music? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, oh, well, that's not going to work too well for me. But so the result of that, of being intentional about what my needs were and advocating for myself in that moment, meant that during that award ceremony, every single one of the awardees got their own walk-on music that was reflective. And then you had a room full of people that also did not have to listen to, even though it was a great ditty, and it was, but it was like you didn't, it had it been played for every walk-on and walk-off for every awardee, it would have been a little exhausting. So when that happened, I came back to the table and I was like, this is great. This is like the proof is in the pudding. You ask for what you want, you ask for what you need, and guess what? Other people want or need the same thing, and everyone benefits. There's my shorter story.
Okay. But also what we're taking away from that is speak out, speak your truth, speak your voice, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm so pleased that you have been so successful with all of this and you truly deserve all of the recognition. So what I was going to say is now I think that if people haven't heard about the Queer Wine Fest, they're going to be like, right, I want to come next time. So I want to use that as my segue to get you to talk a little bit about the Willamette Valley, where you are. Are you in the Dundee Hills? Am I right?
Yeah,
Have I
we're
made that
in
up?
the South Dundee Hills. The Dundee Hills, like the AVA has, we're like it like runs through the property. We're in the Dayton watershed, South Dundee Hills. But yes, we're in the beautiful red hills of the Willamette Valley.
And you say red hills. Am I right? It's like a basalt soil, but it's kind of red.
It's,
Is that
there's
why
a
you're calling it the red
Yeah,
hills?
there's a volcanic Jory soil that is red, and that's why it's called the Red Hills.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Just checking that I got that right. So I want you to describe for a second, because you've talked about your own estate, you've talked about the forest around it, the nature, what you're doing. So I know from never visiting, but from seeing photos, we're talking kind of rolling hills. I've seen all these pictures. It's such a green area. For everybody who doesn't know, it's on, there's a reason why Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are grown there. It's got a similar climate to Burgundy. You're on the same parallel, I think the 45th. But what is it like for you walking around looking? How would you describe the climate for you in the region that you are of Willamette Valley?
Well, the climate is changing rapidly, as we know.
Mm.
We definitely see it here. We're getting longer, hotter summers. Many areas are struggling with not enough resource for water, or just being in perpetual drought, or long instances of drought. You wouldn't know that to look out my window, because it is lush and green. I'm surrounded by large old oaks and Douglas fir and madrone trees, in addition to these beautiful vines. Oregon doesn't yet have the scene where you see nothing but hills of vineyards. I hope that stays that way. Just like everything else, biodiversity is important. That's something that the founders of the Oregon wine industry really knew and expressed. I hope that they have a legacy type impact as people continue to plant here, because biodiversity is also, suppresses the spread of disease, for instance, and creates natural predation and all sorts of things. So it's a very beautiful area. It is very rural, but quite bucolic. And it's a nice temperate day. I don't know. It's probably like 70 degrees out. Oh, which translates to like 22, 23, something like
Thanks for
that.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful, and it rains a lot. It rains a lot, which is why it's so green. But sometimes we're still in a drought even when it's raining a lot, but it does rain a lot.
Yeah, I looked this up. You get more than 1,000 millimeters of rain on average. And actually, in England, and we moan it rains all the time, but it's very normal for 700, sometimes to 800 millimeters. So you get way more rain than we do. I know that you've got this average growing season of about 15.9. I looked this up, degrees Celsius. And no, I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit. But what I can say for everybody is it's really cool. I mean, if things are changing and things are warming up, but it is really cool. And that is why, of course, Pinot Noir's found a really good home. We talked about Chardonnay, Pinot Gris,
Mhm.
Riesling. But this allows me to ask questions. Now, I know it's warmer when you get down to South Oregon. But for you, well, of course, you've got the whole desert-like conditions on the other side of the Cascade Mountains. But you, where you are actually championing Italian varieties like Lagrein. So I want to pick your brain about your choice of grape plantings and what you think they're doing, how they're expressing terroir where you are.
So, about when I was early in the wine industry here, I would go to a symposium, and I listened to this climatologist talk every year about how the grape conditions were going to be changing. And I saw some growers start to respond to that by planting small experimental sites with varietals other than what Oregon was largely known for. And that also is a repetition of what the people that were originally planting grapes here were doing. Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, Pinot Gris got all this attention and took off, but most of the founding wineries here also had a few rows of Dolcetto, Arnaz, and many, many, many other varietals, depending on the winery. Muscat. Oh, there's a Swiss varietal Chasselas. Anyways. So I knew about this Lagrein that there was a half acre of only. And I had the opportunity to work with it from the very first time the fruit was available. As I dove into the world of Lagrein, there's a lot of really interesting similarities between the Alto Adige, which is kind of the foothills of the Alps, and the Dolomites. So a lot of similarities also between that region and this region. There's a lot of similarities in soils. They're geographically just about the same size. Actually, the Willamette Valley and the Alto Adige are about the same size. And then Lagrein is genetically related to Pinot Noir, anciently genetically related, but still genetically related. So we planted Lagrein starting in 2009 and 11. And what it has done for us is not only bring a varietal to the region that is itself underrepresented, but also it's been such an incredible varietal for the area because it has kind of a different cluster anatomy than Pinot Noir. So it's a much looser cluster and it has thicker skins. So as we're starting to see humidity here, like we haven't experienced before, it has some natural mold resistance to it just through the anatomical shape of the cluster. And then the wines themselves, the Lagrein, it's in that influence of Pinot Noir gives it kind of a delicacy to it, but it also has a relationship to Syrah. And it's such an interesting varietal because it has these delicacies, but with a very strong backbone. So we planted that original half acre that was put in the ground mostly got ripped out, maybe entirely. I've actually lost track of that. So, but now other people have planted. So now there's about 5 or 6 plantings in the state of Lagrein. Our team has done comparative tastings with some of the other wineries. We'll do our best to line up and say, okay, do you this vintage and this varietal, and talk about the things that we're doing. We're not all using the same trellising system, for instance. So just really talking about the impacts that we're seeing. And I love it. It is a very late ripener. The latest I've ever picked is November. We're usually harvesting in September. So that's a lot, but it doesn't spike in sugar. It seems to maintain its acidity. It's very acidic. It has a ton of color, a ton of color. It's unbelievable. Like it got the noir from the Pinot Noir, man. It is an amazing wine. And it doesn't like shoot up in sugar. So we're harvesting regularly in October and at like 22 or 23 bricks. So we're resulting in 11 and 12% alcohol wines, and they're gorgeous.
I've always really enjoyed Lagrein as a grape variety because actually they've got lovely fruits that normally a bit of spice and violets. Well, certainly at least the wines that I've tasted from Alto Adige, but then gorgeous acidity, like really refreshing but structured at the same time. So they've got that grip, super food friendly because of the acidity as well. But yeah, they're definitely I'd love to taste the wines that you do out of Oregon. I can really see how it will work. So do you
I think
feel
you need
like
to come for
this?
Queer Wine Fest.
I think I do. I think I do, and I will
Yeah.
make sure to try that. Do you think that this is a great variety for the future then? This is
Mhm.
almost like future solid.
Future solid. I don't know that those two words can go together. I think it's a great varietal for the region.
Okay,
And
we'll
I
leave
would
it there.
be encouraged to see more people planting it.
Okay. And I want to talk to you about your wine making style. Your use of chestnut barrels and extended aging, which is actually not very typical. So, what do you get from that? What does that add to the wines that you are making?
Yes. So, as you may imagine, I am as intentional with my wines and my winemaking as I am with everything else. And, I love the experience of wine generally and fitting the right wine to the right occasion. But part of what I try to build in my wines, and I do think about it in that way, that you're building a wine, you're adding layers, not dissimilar from cooking or laying out a garden. You're constant you're thinking about how all these things will interplay with one another. And it's important to me to create an experience when you're enjoying my wines that is reflective of the complexity of the grapes, without itself being a too obscure or bizarro wine. And they're not bizarro. They're very soundly made, but really well and finely crafted wines. So with the Lagrein, for instance, I do 2 years of barrel aging. It also usually gets about 50% oak, which is a lot for me in my production generally, but it's an aggressive in addition to all those other things that I mentioned about it. It's like a really aggressive varietal. The acid is aggressive, the tannin's aggressive upfront. And so I kind of have to tame it over time. And that's, you can't make up for time. I also find that over vintaging my wines makes them more complex at an earlier age. And I'm not really interested in making wines and asking people to not drink them for a period of time. When I release something, I want it to be ready to drink. So if I've kept that wine in barrel for 2 years and in bottle for an additional year before I even offer it to you for sale, that wine is fantastic and it's age, and it doesn't mean it won't keep aging beautifully, but like I am delivering you this product in the form in which where I'm like, this is a great expression of it. With the chestnut, so chestnut is a great, very spice. I would describe it as spicy kind of a wood to use, but it's also very porous. And as all of us wine folks know, porous means oxygen exchange, and nobody wants an overly oxidative wine. So, we want to not overly expose our wines to oxygen, but I want the spice of the chestnut. So we just take some, a couple barrels, and we move it into chestnut for the very last month of its life. It transforms those wines. It builds tons of mid palate in the wine. And I really feel, I think I described the wood as spicy because it adds these beautiful spice elements to that wine. And it makes this huge impact in the product that we're putting out. Yeah.
Are there many wineries in Oregon using chestnut barrels?
No. The importer usually tells me that it's like my one barrel, I get one a year, and they're like, "Really, you want one of these again?" I'm like, "Yep, just one again this year." We use them for a couple years and then we sell them to distillers.
Interesting. I mean, do you know anyone in other countries, the regions using chestnut barrels?
Well, it has been used in the past. I mean, yes, I mean, they don't, it's not like commercially available because of my one barrel purchase a year. Somebody else has to be using it. Um, no, but it's
Logically.
yes, logically, but I do take a lot of cues from Italian culture and Italian winemaking, and you can see that throughout my wines in different ways.
Let's talk about those other wines. Like, talk to me about Black Heart Sparkling and Unmet Desire, because these are also supporting the causes you care about.
Yeah, so we have two wines in our available, as you might be able to tell from talking to me, we have a number of different wines that are available because I like to do a number of different things. But we have two wines that are dedicated fundraising wines, and what that means is that just, percentage of every bottle goes to the nonprofits. And so our Black Heart is our Method Champenoise Sparkling. It's all estate Pinot Noir. It's a beautiful bottle of wine. It takes me about 3.5 to 4 years to make it. I'm always aiming for it to be a Blanc de Noir. It is hard not to get a little tinge of pink in there. It is hard for me to do because I'm not, I'm never going to strip the color from my wine, right? Like you can do that. I think I worked for one winery that did it a long time ago, but I could do it if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make the wine. I'm not going to put anything I don't need to put in it to especially change an aesthetic. So the Black Heart, which is our Method Champenoise Sparkling, supports the ACLU of Oregon, the American Civil Liberties Union, and then Unmet Desire supports Wine Country Pride, which is that nonprofit that I mentioned forever ago that is also supported by Queer Wine Fest. And that label was drawn by my friend Victoria Bradley, who's also a member of the queer community. And it was a really wonderful development process. And it's a gorgeous label. It's got a silhouette on it. It's quite lovely. An outline, a figure.
I agree. I've seen it. It's very, very beautiful. So you're doing all these projects. I think everybody listening is realizing it's not just about creating a beautiful wine community. It's this that extends so much further. Have you got hopes for Oregon as a region to lead the way in equity and sustainability? Do you have an idea of a vision for the next generation of wine leaders?
I think Oregon's well positioned to be leading in that space, partially because we're a young wine region. And we always have to be looking and learning from those that are younger than us, right? And so, as a young wine region, I think that we have a lot to offer and we're activated here, right? This Queer Wine Fest was such an enormous push, but there's now many activations that are happening that are like Queer Wine Fest. And we've also been on the leading edge of pushing for healthcare for our vineyard stewards. And that's been a long time important effort as of the industry as a whole. And so right now, with where the United States is, especially, I think the Oregon wine industry is intricately tied to kind of the success of the region, really, and that extends to the economic success of the region. Where I forget our what our billions of dollars of impact is on the economy. When I say us, I mean the Willamette Valley and the Oregon wine economy, not Remy Wines. Our 2,500 cases of wine do not sell for billions of dollars. But yeah, they're really intricately tied, and the Oregon wine industry is already leading and advancing work that serves especially queer and immigrant communities.
I think, you say that you as a winery yourself are not going to have this maybe economical impact, but I always think now I'm getting a bit deep, but it's like, it's the wave that, we every day when we wake up and we impact somebody positively, they're in a better place, they're in a better mood, they can impact somebody else positively. And it's that knock on effect. So I think that you are impacting far greater than you
Well, I
realize.
know I'm making a big economic impact. Don't get me wrong. I just meant that Remy Wines isn't receiving
Mm.
billions of dollars for our small 2,500 case production. It's
Yeah.
almost like it's almost a joke because I mean, we, my focus isn't on making myself wealthy, but also that's not my focus. So that's not necessarily what I'm doing. But
Well,
I'm a very happy person that has created more wealth in this region and for many, many, many people and many organizations.
so what is next? What are you dreaming into reality right now? Is it a wine? Is there a new movement, a message that you want people to know?
I'm laughing because I often get asked what's next, which is funny because I'm already doing so many things. So
Yeah,
right
so why so
now,
another thing more, why not?
yeah. So right now I'm very active working on the Wine Country Pride board. Again, just there's so much need for queer spaces and queer resources right now, especially with attacks on the trans community in America that are so devastating, and loss of employment and loss of security. So that's very active space in my life right now, and I look at seeing how we can develop that as a board and as a team to become an even greater resource for the community. So that's what I'm doing on the hyper local level. On the kind of state level, I'm just continuing to be a real good resource and advocate for people that are working in and around policy. I'm a policy nerd, so and I enjoy it. And the people that I worked with, we didn't even talk about. I just concluded 14 years in public service, which with the end of that was that I was the mayor of the city of McMinnville, which is a city of 35,000 people. But so I'm still engaged at the state level and working with folks there. And that keeps me feeling really filled up and knowing that I'm making an impact. So I've got those things going on. And then I'm thinking about outing my drag king character, Antibiotic, but I don't know. It feels like a big ship, Mayor, the drag king, but I feel like I could do it. I think what I'm really saying is I plan on being really visible. And I think visibility is really important right now, as we're, you know, as our rights are under attack. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm just lead with intention.
Good. I cannot wait to see Remy the Drag King. I have one more question for you as we finish off, which is for those people that are listening that are working in the wine industry, and especially those running small wineries, what is one action that they could take this year to create a more inclusive business model?
Well, I think it really starts with self-examination. It's not that there's no one size or one shoe fits all kind of deal. So I think really starting by just looking and kind of evaluating your company. Ask yourself hard questions about how you do things right now. Who do you trust? Are you trying to hire people that are, and I'm putting quotations around these words, like us or like me? If your framework of mind is that you only want to onboard people that you see yourself reflected in, then you're not going to be, you're going to be missing out a lot because you're only going to be getting your own ideas back at you. And you're not going to be really serving or accessing this broader world of wine. And why do we make wine? To share it with our communities. So
Thank
that's what
you.
I would do. Take a hard look at self.
And that is beautiful. So thank you so much. You've certainly, for me listening, I'm gonna finish this podcast and actually go off into, ha- thinking more intention, that I want to spend the next few days doing all my tasks with more intention. So thank you so much for actually just bringing something a little bit different to these podcast episodes. Slightly less wine education, but really, really deep and thoughtful. Something extra for everyone to really, really consider. So, and keep making those beautiful wines, and I will come and taste
Please
them
do. See you
soon.
soon.
Thank you. See you soon. Well, I hope you are leaving this conversation with Remy Drabkin feeling inspired. Next week, I'm joined by Claudine and Michelle, the remarkable founders of Heya Wines in Lebanon. This episode is all about community and soul, about coming together through real challenges, from struggles with water and electricity to the systemic inequalities Lebanese women face in the wine industry. They ensure equal pay for women. But before we go, a quote that speaks to the spirit of this series. Just as a vineyard thrives in diversity, so do we. If this episode has moved you, please share the podcast and rate, leave a review if it's possible on the podcast app you are listening to. It really helps others find these stories and this community. So until next week, wine friends, cheers to you.